on X-Men.
The podcast that looks back on X-Men comics, movies, shows, characters, and more. You can find more about the show and others like it at our network's website, radiomeanwhile.com. Other shows on the network include Three Nice Things, where we force ourselves to say three nice things about a movie with a bad and often earned reputation. There's Is It Classic, Does It Rock, where we pick a band or artist and go through their discography album by album, track by track. And 9021 Here We Go, a 90210 rewatch podcast.
You know, you always say you have to force yourself to say three nice things, but lately it sort of seems like you just kind of like the movie.
The Street Fighter one, I think I was definitely suffering from something. So the other two were just like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, this was fun. We'll have to do an X-Men Street Fighter crossover episode when we cover Street Fighter versus the X-Men.
Perfect.
The Capcom fighting game.
Well, I mean, we'll get there eventually, right?
We'd have to, yeah. We're going to run out of stuff. We need content. Share your thoughts on this and upcoming episodes by following us on Facebook and Twitter at Previously on X. Please rate, subscribe, and share the show on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. I'm Eric Mickles, known online as Dust vs. Tweak, and with me is my co-host Hilary Gunning.
Hello.
Today we are spotlighting... Oh no.
Oh no.
I can't see the script!
Oh my god.
Everything's turning red! My power's out of control!
What are we doing?
Curse my optic blast!
Okay.
Hilary, we're spotlighting Cyclops.
Yes, I picked up on that from your bit.
I think that was a pretty good recreation of any Cyclops panel.
You know, that's fair. That is...
Cyclops, the field leader of the X-Men.
Cyclops from the X-Men.
Cyclops. Scott Summers. We're going to go through his origin, his history, other appearances he's made. One of us is feeling a little bit more positive about him.
Can you guess which one? So you said, first of all, you said his name is Scott Summers. Mm-hmm. I read today that apparently his first, the first time they called his name or whatever, it was Slim. Like, his name was Slim.
Yeah, they just called him Slim.
And then they were like, I mean, Scott,
yeah.
Slim is a nickname.
Yep.
His name was Slim Summers.
I know.
Like, on purpose.
Look, Stan Lee was working on things. He was creating things as he was working on them. I
read things that I can't forget.
I guess the first time you saw Cyclops or saw anything with Cyclops in it would be the animated show, right?
Yeah.
The 90s animated cartoon?
Yep, it's a good example.
Okay. Mine is Giant Size X-Men #1.
Okay. It's interesting that your first experience was that because all that stuff has repercussions for his entire life. It just keeps coming back. It's like Krakoa did stuff and we don't trust Xavier and it all goes back there.
Everything that ever happened to Cyclops keeps coming back to
Did we think that would be such an influential
Krakoa,
moment?
yeah. And now it's back right now in the comics.
Yeah.
So, in a big way. I thought Krakoa had peaked as being their lawn guardian.
Yeah.
Their
their
pet
little
dog.
pet.
Yeah. Nope. But anyways, this isn't a Krakoa spotlight.
Yet.
This is a Cyclops spotlight. Every episode somehow becomes a Krakoa spotlight.
That'll be a few episodes down the line.
Yeah.
We do talk about Krakoa quite a lot.
It's more important to the X-Men than I want to admit sometimes. But we should get into Cyclops right now. Because
let's do it.
Cyclops first appeared in X-Men #1 in September 1963, created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby.
Yep.
So right from the get-go, he's been there since the beginning.
He's legit. Before
he joined the X-Men, he had quite the life.
Yeah.
That he wasn't even aware of at some stuff. So I don't know if there's memories that are as important as his parents being abducted, but it seems like that's always just his life starts.
Well, I mean,
at the airplane.
I would say that the interesting stuff about Cyclops' life starts with the fact that he grew up in Alaska.
He grew up in Anchorage, Alaska.
That's weird.
Yeah.
I mean,
his grandparents were there.
Fine. If you live in Alaska, good for you.
Yeah.
But, that's unusual.
Yeah, it's interesting. So
I was thinking, for some reason, when I was thinking about talking about Cyclops,
right.
I was going to make some joke about, it's because my son watches a show called, I keep thinking it's Dora. It's not Dora.
Diego?
I can't remember. It's a little girl who lives in Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to make a joke. It's not Doc McStuffins.
Okay.
I was going to make a joke about does she know him? But then she doesn't live in Anchorage. But then I was like, that could be the one place where it makes sense for you to assume that if you live there, you know everyone else. Because there's 12 people who live in Alaska.
Goodness. Apologies to Alaskan listeners.
It's interesting, Eric.
All right. So, what happened to Cyclops before he joined the X-Men?
How have we digressed this much already?
His mother and father were abducted by the Shi'ar, an alien bird-like race. And that's the...
Are they bird-like?
The Shi'ar?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're bird people.
They're bird people?
Their hair is all feathery.
Yeah, I guess I thought those were like headdresses.
Deathbird. Lilandra's sister, Deathbird.
Okay, but like...
She's got the wings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure, they're bird people.
Yeah, they're bird aliens.
Does that mean they're also sort of dinosaur people?
I guess so, yeah. They've evolved from dinosaur aliens into bird people. So... It feels funny just saying, like, his parents were abducted by the Shi'ar, but that's really...
They were abducted by aliens.
That's where Cyclops' crazy story starts. They were in it. His father had an airplane, a military airplane, a Mosquito, they called it.
Yep.
And a Shi'ar spacecraft shows up, starts abducting the ship, and his dad takes Scott and his brother Alex, and pushes them out with the...
They just throw them out of the plane.
Throw them out of the plane with a parachute. Unbeknownst to Scott, he has another brother, Vulcan.
Yeah, so this brother is not in the plane with them.
Technically he is, because the mother is pregnant with... So his brother Vulcan was removed from his dead mother after the Shi'ar Emperor killed her.
Ew.
D'Ken.
Gross.
D'Ken stabbed her, and then, like, they removed the child.
Well, that's
unpleasant. And then raised Vulcan in a vat. So
what?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Like he wasn't developed yet? Put like
an
artificial womb?
I don't know how far along he was.
Well, I mean, if he was in a vat...
They put him in a vat.
Probably not.
I think it was
long.
some accelerated growth.
Okay.
As well. I don't really care about Vulcan.
The extent of my knowledge of Vulcan is that he exists.
Yeah. So during the abduction, Scott and his younger brother Alex, who would later become Havoc, parachuted out of their father's plane, which then exploded. Which is why Scott thought both his parents were dead.
And everyone thought, like readers thought,
everybody,
for a long time.
Some origin stories show Scott taking debris to the head, and that is the injury that explains his lack of control over his powers.
And it's not just because he's dumb and weak.
Wow. I think I read somewhere that says, like, not all origin stories include that. I think they should.
I mean, it makes sense. Yeah. I mean, like, but it's not really necessary, is it? Because, like, lots of mutants can't control their powers.
That's true, yeah. Like,
do we need an explanation
Rogue wasn't
for that?
just walking down the street one day and got hit by a bird and was like, oh, no!
No longer.
Don't touch me, y'all! That bird really did a number. During the abduction, I read that part. So Scott and his brother were put into an orphanage in Omaha, Nebraska. So he went from Alaska to
Nebraska.
And I tell you what,
they rhyme.
It doesn't when you really know Cyclops' personality, it makes a lot of sense that he grew up in Nebraska.
Of course he grew up in Nebraska. Eating only rice and potatoes or something.
Wow. We're really
they're bland.
We're really taking it to the other parts of this country we don't know anything about.
You started it. You said it was obvious.
For a podcast about
I'm sorry, never mind.
About
Nebraska's
a group of heroes
fine.
teaching us how diversity is strength.
I have
really
no
not
reason
honoring
to
that
have
lesson.
any negative feelings about Nebraska. I'm sure it's lovely.
So Cyclops being taken away from his parents is due to aliens. His time in the orphanage is due to Mr. Sinister. There's no simple part of Cyclops' childhood from
He's just been, like,
plain to... Yep. So Mr. Sinister experimented on Cyclops during his time in the orphanage.
Ew.
In fact, Sinister kept Scott in a coma for a year.
Holy crap!
Cyclops woke up, used his optic blast in the hospital, and...
as a kid?
Yeah. And then gave him a drug and kept him in a coma for a year while trying to study and control the optic blast.
Mr. Sinister... Mind your own business.
It was also later added that Sinister is the one who created Cyclops' ruby quartz glasses.
Really?
He was disguised.
So really, he should be thanking him.
I guess. He was pretending to be this guy. I think his name was like Mr. Milbury or something. Mm-hmm. He was the one. I think that was even a retcon, like it was just a government agent who gave him a ruby quartz glasses, but they retconned it so it was Sinister. Him. Sinister also made it so Alex would be adopted and Scott wouldn't.
Oh my gosh.
So that he could continue to experiment and study Cyclops in his life.
Do you think Sinister just like really felt like he needed to live up to his name? Do you think that's what it is? No, he didn't take on the name Sinister.
Right.
He was born
as Sinister.
And decided that, what am I going to do? Fight against this my entire life?
Should I get into like Sinister's like comic book, like Chris Claremont's plans on Sinister?
No. Let's save that.
For a Sinister spotlight.
Let's do a Sinister spotlight.
Heck yeah.
I'll just take that week off.
What?
I don't want to just be like...
You don't like Mr. Sinister?
No, I don't like Mr. Sinister.
I don't think you like any of the villains in the X-Men universe.
I don't particularly.
Do you just want the X-Men to, like, hang
just...
out and play tennis all day and be like, boy, sure was rough playing tennis for mutant rights today.
I would love that.
Oh my gosh. You just described, like, an anime.
Yeah.
An X-Men sports manga.
I just want an X-Men soap opera where they're just, like, living their lives and having little...
You only ever want them, like, coming back into the mansion saying, like, that mission was rough.
Yep.
So, wait a second, who sold my father's couch? Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well.
His father's couch.
Yeah. So, no Mr. Sinister in that soap opera.
No.
All right.
No.
All right.
He's just so dark. Do you not, I mean, like, all the genetic stuff and, like, there's weird, like, kind of sex stuff going on. It's not like sex, but it's like, because of the reproduction.
Sure.
Stuff. Yeah. It's gross.
Okay.
He's gross. Anyway.
Okay.
This is not...
So we won't be talking about Mr. Sinister's weird
Cyclops.
sex stuff. This is a Cyclops spotlight.
Back to Cyclops.
But we will come back to Sinister in this very episode. Sorry.
Yeah, repeatedly.
So after running away from a mob, due to his uncontrollable powers, Scott also spent some time with this guy called Jack of Diamonds. No, sorry, I said Jack of Diamonds. It's just Jack O'Diamonds.
Jack O'Diamonds.
Jack O'Diamonds wanted to turn Scott into a criminal. Instead, Jack was turned into a diamond, and then he exploded.
Oh, I missed that part.
Which is then when Cyclops was invited to join the X-Men by Xavier.
So just sort of a standard coming-of-age story.
That was the childhood of Scott Summers.
Scott Summers.
Alien abductions, crazy spider-like geneticist messing with his mind for, let's say, his entire teenage life. Mm-hmm. And then he joined the X-Men after hanging out with a weird man.
And this is all basically just, like...
I think it was Claremont who introduced the ship exploding.
Uh-huh.
And...
But, like, when we first see Cyclops, it's just like, hi, I'm Cyclops, I'm in the X-Men.
That's right. When it's first, he just walks through or something. I think the first time we see him is where they're all, like, freaking out that Jean's there in the first panel. They're like, golly, a girl!
Holy gee!
So, let's go through the decades to see what was happening to Cyclops.
Okay.
The 60s.
The 60s.
Cyclops is falling in love with Jean Grey. Who is also falling in love with Cyclops. But sometimes...
Unbeknownst to him.
Yes, he doesn't know. And she's a psychic, so she must know.
She probably knows, yeah.
But he also thinks that she would like Warren, the angel. Because Angel's handsome and always hitting on Jean.
Yeah.
But Jean doesn't like Angel that way. And I think it takes a long time for them to admit that they have feelings for each other. Mm-hmm. I don't even know like where their first kiss is in the comics, but it's a lot farther than you think.
That I read was like they're not together and then they admit their feelings for each other and become lovers.
Yeah.
That's what it says. So just like bam.
Bam. I don't think they technically become lovers until right before the Dark Phoenix saga. If you're getting real technical about that.
That's what I would have thought.
Yeah. That's what's happening in the 60s. Cyclops is the field leader of the X-Men. He's calling the shots. Xavier's the leader, but Cyclops is out there as their
He's the golden
tactical.
boy.
Yeah. And he's basically just kind of like played very straight for all that. His biggest burden is that he can't control his optic blast. I guess we should talk about his power real quick. Cyclops' power is that he has an optic blast.
If you don't know what Cyclops' power is, we don't want you here.
Well, we had to explain... Well, I guess Scarlet Witch has had many incarnations of powers.
Yeah.
But yeah, Cyclops is... There's some things about his optic blast that are inconsistent depending on what you're watching or reading sometimes.
Sometimes they burn things, and that makes me
Sometimes
mad.
they generate heat. They shouldn't.
They should not.
The
it
common...
is force.
Yes, the common use is that it's a forced blast. So if you're like being hit with like a blast of water, it's similar to that.
Yeah, which I think is more interesting than just being like, it's a laser or whatever.
Yeah, it's not a heat
Just like with Scarlet Witch, I think it's more interesting for it to be probability than just like
Chaos
magic.
Yeah. But it is funny because Havoc's powers, his brother, does generate heat. Cyclops' power is also apparently recharged by the sun, though I very rarely see that show up in the comics anymore.
Yeah, I have heard that.
It's a solar charge.
Yeah.
So I guess that kind of makes sense if you're like, oh, it generates heat, but I haven't seen the sun play a part in his powers in a long time.
Yeah.
He can't control them, like everybody should probably know. So he either has to wear his ruby quartz sunglasses all the time, or he has to wear his visor.
So what do you suppose that does? Like, do you think that like there's constantly something coming out of his eyes and they hit the ruby quartz?
I think that's what it's supposed to do, yeah.
But if it's force, how would that, like, wouldn't it just knock him off?
I think...
Let's get into this.
Aren't the glasses always kind of like around his head?
But like how much...
Strapped?
You've seen how much force
Yeah.
I mean...
I don't know, maybe the ruby quartz glasses keep them from even activating.
Well, see, yeah, that's what it must be.
Yeah, I've never really questioned it. Sometimes I'm like, why ruby quartz? I don't think you're supposed to. He can't control it, so he has to wear those. Sometimes he can control it, but then he can't anymore. That's it. That's his power. It's a pretty simple power. Yeah. But I feel like people get a lot of use out of it.
Well, he's blunt force.
Yeah, he's blunt force.
It is interesting to have someone who has... It ends up being like an immense amount of power, but he struggles with it so much. Like, that's just an interesting concept to mess with on a regular basis.
I don't know how strong it was, like, power-wise at the beginning, but now people are like, he could level a mountain. And I have read issues where, like, they're in a canyon and there's no way out, so he just blasts a hole through the canyon with his optic blast.
Yeah, I wonder if there's, like, any amount of effort to it, like if he takes off his glasses,
sometimes it does
then
seem,
there's an amount that's, like, just automatic, but then he can, like, push it out more.
There's some issues where he's, like, fighting Apocalypse, and he's blasting Apocalypse, and then later he beats Apocalypse by just blasting Apocalypse, but this time with more.
With passion.
Yeah. He has to feel it. It's not his eyes, it's his heart.
It's his heart.
It's his heart blast. Cyclops finds his brother again.
He finds his brother.
Havoc, who then will join the team and they'll hang out. They always kind of have a rivalry. Chris Claremont always has them referring to each other as brother o' mine, which drove me up a wall. They're saying it so many times. They're like, you want to fight brother o' mine? And I'm like, shut up, shut up, shut up. Brothers don't talk like this. I think
they're just really, really trying to remember their siblings.
We're brothers. Fun fact about Cyclops and Havoc, their powers do not affect each other.
Like Cyclops can't blast.
Right, and Havoc's powers don't work on Cyclops.
Are there other siblings? Like, is that a thing with mutants that like their powers are connected like that?
The Fenris kids, the brother and sister, they have to be in physical contact for their powers to work.
Okay.
Probably
Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver.
Well,
are completely different.
Yeah.
But then they have their whole weird background.
They're always holding hands.
Oh, girl.
But that's the 60s. And then the X-Men books were canceled, which we've talked about.
The 60s.
And they just kind of hung around for a while. Not a lot of character development, more just appearances. And now...
Just like a 60s comic.
Yeah. Wait, no. I feel like the X-Men had like a rotating door of writers a lot of times. There's, in just like the 10 years or so that the X-Men were going, whereas like Stan Lee was writing Spider-Man for hundreds of issues and was with the Fantastic Four and other writers would be there for a long time. The X-Men were like Stan and Roy Thomas, and it just writer after writer for a while. And so like there was no like real consistent tone. There's definitely like specific runs in those very early years. But the 70s come along, and now they're rebooting the X-Men with Giant Size X-Men, which you can go back and listen to our thoughts on that whole issue, Giant Size X-Men #1.
We do a whole episode.
We talked all about it because it was my first X-Men comic. But to reiterate, the story is basically the X-Men get captured by Krakoa. Cyclops has to take a team of rough and tough X-Men to go get him. I said rough and tough, but I guess I'm just thinking Wolverine.
They're rookies.
But it's rookies. Wolverine, Storm, Nightcrawler, and Colossus, and some others to the island. When we talked about Giant Size X-Men, the issue ends with, I think it's Angel being like, what are we going to do with 14 X-Men? Can you imagine?
Yeah.
The next issue of X-Men basically takes over that plot thread with them all being like, let's leave.
Yeah.
They all decide to leave.
Not do
even Jean Grey, but Cyclops stays.
Because it's his responsibility.
It's his responsibility, and it's very sad for Cyclops because the woman he loves is leaving, but he has to stay and be an X-Men. So all his friends, all his college buddies, his girlfriend, gone.
Self-imposed
He's staying
sadness.
To teach these, some of them grown adults.
Just full-grown adults.
How to be.
Many of them.
All the new X-Men in that group are at least older than Cyclops was when Cyclops started as an X-Men. Because I think they were all supposed to be like 16 when we first meet them. Cyclops is now older and wiser, but he's hanging out with these new guys. So he's basically with those X-Men for a while. And this is where Chris Claremont comes in and takes over. I guess the big event here is, for Cyclops, I can't think of too many like big Cyclops moments because Jean's the one who's really like getting all the big moments, which then affect Cyclops because he loves her.
Cyclops has lots of feelings.
He has lots of feelings. He's always feeling, yes. Jean almost dies, or she does die, or she's kept in a pod under the water.
Or whatever.
During the during the crash down to Earth while trying to save a spaceship. Anyway, they're crashing down. Everybody thinks she dies. She comes out of the water. She's Phoenix.
Phoenix!
And Cyclops is like, the woman I love! Stories continue along, and then she turns into Dark Phoenix. But before then, they go to a plateau and maybe make love for the first time, Cyclops and Jean Grey.
For the first time
For the first time. Right? I think he's like 25. He's been dating this girl since they were 16.
That track.
And I'm pretty sure she's the one who initiated. But then she dies during the Dark Phoenix saga. And he's very sad.
She dies a lot, man.
She only dies like twice.
More than like the average person.
Cyclops dies twice. Jean Grey has a reputation for dying a lot. She died during the Dark Phoenix saga, and then she died during Grant Morrison's run.
You just said she died when she was
kind of. She was kept in a pod, really.
Okay.
Yeah, the Dark Phoenix saga affects all the X-Men. They're all very sad. Cyclops is the most sad. He leaves the X-Men, which takes us into the 80s. Not a lot of character development for poor old Cyclops during the 70s.
No.
He's being given a little bit more depth now, I think, as the leader. He's the leader. His angst are definitely out of control. He's definitely always cursing his optic blast throughout the 70s.
Well, I think that's sort of, for a while, that's almost his only character trait.
Yeah, but
he's either just a happy leader or he's being like, I wish I could control it.
Well, I think I
could not wear glasses.
This first issue where we see him and everybody's leaving is like the beginning of him trying to decide, like, do I need to stay on the X-Men? Can I live my own life? Kind of like, am I always supposed to be a soldier mentality? And I think that definitely becomes like his ongoing trait. You can kind of see like that beginning all the stuff with Utopia and everything that was just even a couple of years ago. But the reason why the 70s aren't that long is because it was bi-monthly for a little bit. He leaves the X-Men because he's so heartbroken. And so we just kind of follow him around. He gets on a riverboat at one point with, I can't remember her name. They meet Despair and the Man-Thing at one point. That was like one of the first single issues I read. Yeah, Despair is this villain who brings out people's nightmares or fears. I remember reading that comic, and then there was a Mr. Sinister episode on TV, and they called him Sinister. I'm like, that's Despair, because they look the same, but they don't. And I was just an ignorant young man at the time.
It's just embarrassing for you.
But then issue X-Men 150 happens, and he comes back to the X-Men. But then he does find out he has grandparents. He's I think it's Xavier's like, you have grandparents. It's like, what? Oh my gosh.
I've kept this from you.
Yeah,
that's what I do.
He goes to Alaska to meet his grandparents. I guess, I don't know on whose side. I can't remember.
On whose side?
Oh, you know what?
I see.
It's on his father's side.
Okay.
It's his paternal grandparents. So he gets to go see them. Maybe it's not.
It's a weird stand to take if you don't really know.
Anyway.
You know what?
Yeah.
I think it's okay that they're just his grandparents.
Yeah, they're his grandparents. He finds out he has a space pirate dad.
Space pirate.
So he met Corsair.
As discoveries go, that's not bad.
That's not bad. That's a pretty good one. He met Corsair the first time during the whole Phoenix saga.
Also, Corsair, pretty cool name.
That is pretty cool. Christopher Summers, Corsair, they met during the Phoenix saga, not the Dark Phoenix saga, the Phoenix saga, where they're battling D'Ken over the M'Kraan crystal. And they're fighting, and he meets Corsair, but neither one of them know. Though part of me thinks Jean does. Maybe that's just the cartoon. I'm having a hard time remembering if Jean found out in the comics first. I think she does. They find out they're related. Corsair's like, you're my son!
Yay!
And Cyclops is, I'm sure he cried.
Reunited and it feels... Okay,
I thought you were just going to keep going.
Stop.
Yeah.
You were just waiting so patiently.
But then, of course, Corsair goes back to space. He doesn't stay around long. He's like, hey, it's been great knowing you, son. I gotta get going.
I gotta take off.
Making out with this space cat lady.
I don't remember
Hazabar.
the space cat.
Hazabar, however you say her name. The white cat lady. The white cat lady who's part of the Starjammers.
He should not be making out with a cat.
I think they... So... Also, when he meets his grandparents, Cyclops meets Madeline Pryor, who's working for them. She's a pilot. She looks like Jean Grey a bit. She's got red hair, is basically it.
Okay.
So
she has red hair and a woman and is therefore interchangeable.
I think Chris Claremont wanted her to look similar to Jean so that Cyclops had to, like, get over Jean.
That's a bad way to do it.
There's a scene where he asks, are you Jean Grey reincarnate? And she just... wails him. Good. She just cold cocks him right in the face and knocks him down. And I think I read somewhere that Chris Claremont was saying, like, it's the idea that, like, he has to decide if he's still hung up on his old girlfriend or if he can just
yeah.
move on. It is a weird way to go about it, but yeah, she has red hair and everybody thinks she looks like Jean. Chris Claremont, that was it. It was just supposed to be a likeness thing. They just look alike. Cyclops and Madeline fall in love. Aww. And they get married. And they have a baby.
Wow.
Little baby Nathan.
So he settles down and lives happily ever after?
He leaves the X-Men again. He gives Storm control of the X-Men. He's like, they're yours, I'm gone. They had a fight in the Danger Room with no powers, and she beat him. Though that's slightly retconned, which I'm not a huge fan of. But guess what? Jean Grey comes back to life. This is against Chris Claremont's wishes. He did not want Jean Grey to come back, and he almost quit Marvel
really?
Because they were bringing him back.
Well, why did they bring her back?
They just wanted to bring her back. This is where the whole Jean Grey was put into a pod under the water story comes from.
So is that why they said that thing about her in the movies?
What?
In 3?
What? Oh, the cocoon.
That she was in a cocoon?
I guess. Maybe that's what they were working around with. But yeah, over in the Fantastic Four, they brought her back to life, and they, the editor at the time, made sure she took Chris Claremont out to dinner, and then once it was too late to do anything, they told Chris Claremont they were bringing Jean back, and he almost quit. He was very upset because he had no plans for her to come back, and which is he basically, his plan was that he was going to marry Madeline. They were going to have a baby, and that was like his happy ending. He was going to have like a happy ending. I'm sure he'd show up in the X-Men more, but it's like
so he was
Chris
writing
Claremont
him off into the sunset.
He wanted to give Cyclops the best like happy ending you can give a superhero in an ongoing medium.
Interesting. It did not pan
It did not last. Jean Grey comes back, and so Cyclops leaves his wife and newborn to join X Factor with his resurrected girlfriend.
Because that sounds awful.
And he doesn't call her for weeks.
So he just leaves?
She definitely knows he wants to leave, and then he leaves. And I guess it makes sense if I had a dead girlfriend who suddenly was back to life.
Then you would leave your wife?
No, I wouldn't leave my life. I would go see. I would go be like, oh my gosh, she was dead, but she's alive. But then I would come back.
Right.
I would just want to be like, I'm glad you're alive now. That's not enough for Cyclops.
He just ditches them.
He ditches his wife and newborn to join X Factor so he can hang out with his resurrected girlfriend and old college buddies. Because X Factor is the original X-Men now, as a team. This was not Chris Claremont or Louise Simonson. She would later take over, and basically they had to use X Factor the comic to like rehabilitate Cyclops. Because this is where, in Chris Claremont's view, the fact that he leaves his wife and newborn, doesn't call them, and just goes off, he said this is where Cyclops becomes damaged goods. Yeah. And that's just
real bad.
It's no good. And so throughout like the X Factor run, they do a lot of she does a lot of work to rebuild Cyclops. She even described it as like putting him back to where he was supposed to be. And unfortunately, that means a lot of retconning of Madeline Pryor, who had developed to be her own character, especially after Cyclops leaves. She joins the X-Men during their on the run team era and everything, and she really becomes like, you know, her own character that you could become a fan of, not just like this Jean Grey lookalike. Unfortunately, she was the victim of having to make Cyclops not terrible anymore. Inferno happens. This is the storyline we find out Madeline Pryor is a clone of Jean Grey.
Oh, yeah. So it's okay that he ditches her in his...
This was retconned. Mr. Sinister cloned Jean Grey and used her to... She was basically made... The term they use all the time is a broodmare. Because he wants...
See, this is why I don't like Sinister.
This is why Sinister wants a baby from Cyclops. That's why... But Madeline didn't know this.
I might be out for the rest of...
Madeline didn't know she was a clone until a little bit later, but that's when she also makes a pact with a demon when they're in Genosha, and she becomes the Goblin Queen.
Oh.
And we also find out that she has some psychic powers and that she was manipulating the fight between Cyclops and Storm so that Cyclops would lose. So that retcon is kind of saying Storm didn't win off her own skills.
That's so stupid.
I know. And it's also trying to explain why they're together. Baby Nathan, is what Sinister was looking for. It wanted to have happen. But she becomes the Goblin Queen and starts smashing stuff around and everything, and they have to fight her, and she has this big fight with Jean and some demons and everything, and she dies, Madeline dies, and she I mean, at one point she's going to sacrifice Nathan. She sleeps with Havoc and is turning him into his... Okay.
So in order to rehabilitate this jackass who left his wife and newborn son, we have to completely demolish the character of the woman. Just making sure I have
Jean's
this right.
fine. Jean comes out okay.
Oh,
no,
okay.
She doesn't.
Okay.
Actually, I think Jean doesn't even know about Madeline or Nathan for a while. Like, Cyclops doesn't even tell her.
Bananas.
But you know who does know? Everyone else. So, like, Beast and Iceman are like, come join us! No, they know.
Oh my gosh.
But Jean's like, yeah, why wouldn't he? What, is he married or something?
Hilarious. Yeah. Nobody ever talks about it.
So Havoc becomes her, like, Goblin King for a little bit. Everything's on fire. She dies. It's a sad time, and it is a sad retcon for, like, an actual character who basically has to fix other people's dumb decisions.
I don't like it.
This is also where Sinister tells Cyclops that, you know, I experimented on you. It was me there that whole time. I gave you the ruby quartz glasses and everything. And Cyclops is like, what? He finds out Cyclops has been manipulated. And I think at one point, maybe it's Angel during the fight who's like, I knew Cyclops wouldn't do this stuff on his own accord. He was being manipulated.
The entire time.
So it's not Cyclops' fault. But then Cyclops blows up Mr. Sinister.
Like, kills him?
Yeah, he kills Sinister. Sinister's just a skeleton at one point, and then he's gone. And I think that's a thing. I remember that being in the cartoon. That
I was gonna
the
say,
optic blast of Cyclops is very effective against
like
Mr.
the only
Sinister.
thing that can
that was it. Like, Sinister had a big role in a lot of stuff in the X-Men comics, but he only shows up for a few issues, and then he's gone for a long time.
Yeah.
But then he becomes like he's everywhere in the 90s. So that's Inferno. And now he doesn't have to worry about his ex-wife anymore. I guess they weren't even ex anymore.
She was just evil all along.
She was evil, and now she's dead. So now he can...
what about that kid?
Now he takes the kid.
Oh, okay.
He has to. So what else is he going to do? He has to take it. I don't know. It's probably something like, oh, I love him. But, I mean, it's more like, well, I guess I got to take him now.
Brother.
Now that Madeline's out of the way, they can successfully write a Jean Cyclops romance again.
Oh, good.
What else happens to Cyclops in the 80s?
Nothing good, apparently.
Apocalypse, the X-Men villain, is more of an X-Factor villain throughout the 80s. Mm-hmm. He's really not like an X-Men proper villain until the 90s. Really, and probably until Executioner's Song / Age of Apocalypse. Because he's fighting the X-Factor in the beginning. He's the one who turns Angel into Archangel. And then he's also the one who infects baby Nathan, Cyclops' son, with the techno-organic virus. So basically, it's just this organic, cybernetic thing that just fills up your whole body and can kill you.
Okay.
But Nathan's just a little baby. And there's this big fight between Apocalypse and the X-Factor for him. And then the Ascani, they come from the future. She comes from the future to get baby Nathan. And Cyclops has to make a choice. And he lets her take Nathan.
Why does she come to get baby Nathan?
Because he is going to save them in the future.
As a baby?
No, as a grown-up. The techno-organic virus can be halted in the future.
Okay.
So Cyclops has to send his son into the future with her.
So this is like one of those things where she knows because
he's going to be the one who defeats Apocalypse in the future.
But how does she know that?
Because it already happened?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's one of those like weird
Yeah, it's one of those loop things. Anyway, she comes back and gets him.
Okay.
She comes into the past, our present, well, the 80s, and gets Nathan.
The 80s future.
And Cyclops is like, fine, I'll do it. I'll send my son to the future. I don't... He's very sad about it.
I bet.
But then he also doesn't have a son. So
he's free.
It reads like this very dramatic moment for Cyclops, but at the same time, you can definitely tell the writer's like, all right, we got rid of Madeline, we'll get rid of the son. Now he's a single bachelor who's in love with Jean.
Just walk around, do whatever he wants.
He's sad for a little bit about it, though.
I think that's probably how it would go. You send your son to the future.
You'd be sad.
And you're sad for like a couple minutes.
Yeah, but you got your
and then you move on immediately.
Yeah, you got your girlfriend who looked like your ex-wife.
Yeah.
He had a rough 80s.
Cyclops has a weird life.
Yeah. The 90s. The X-Men teams reform, meaning that the original X-Men join back up with the X-Men. There's two teams now. Cyclops is the leader of the blue team. Blue and gold.
Okay.
This is the 90s relaunch of the line. This is where like Jim Lee started the second X-Men title, and X-Men 1 became the highest selling comic book of all time, and still is. Cyclops leads the blue team, which is Basically, the guys I have on my phone: Psylocke, Gambit, Rogue, Beast, Wolverine, Jubilee. I think Jim Lee even picked got to have his pick, which I think is interesting because that means Jim Lee might have picked Cyclops. And, those other X-Men are the cool X-Men if you think about it. Like Gambit and Psylocke.
Yeah, that's
you know?
true. I mean, it's hard to say because for the past decade or so, he hasn't really been part of the X-Men. But it does feel like you have to have Cyclops for, a legit X-Men team.
Jean and Storm were leading the Gold team. It's technically Storm who's leading the Gold team. Yeah. I guess I gave it to Jean due to seniority. That's how the 90s start. Just kind of hopeful. Everybody's back on the team. Mm-hmm. Cyclops is, again, living his best life now. The 80s are behind him. And guess what? He meets Cable. And he finds out that Cable is his son, Nathan, from the future.
From the future!
Cable is now much older than Cyclops. He's an old man. His metal arm and everything is due to the techno-organic virus. Basically, Cable uses his psychic powers to hold back the techno-organic virus.
All the time?
All the time.
Oh my gosh.
Which is why he's got powers, but they're never as strong as Jean's.
Because he's constantly focusing on
right.
the arm.
So when we meet Nate Gray, who is in the Age of Apocalypse, he's like a clone of Jean and Scott in an alternate reality. He's much stronger because he doesn't have the techno-organic virus.
Interesting.
So he's much more powerful. They get to meet and reunite, and Cyclops gets to say, sorry, I wasn't there. But maybe he was. Cyclops and Jean, they get married in the 90s. They finally get married.
The 90s are a happy time.
Well...
for now?
It's been, 30-something years now? 35 years at this point of them dating. Cyclops and Jean.
And then they get married.
And they get married. They've been through a lot. They've been through death and rebirth and ex-clone wives and children from other people. Also, I guess in the 80s, I should mention too, Cyclops and Jean find out they have an alternate reality daughter named Rachel. Mm-hmm. She's from the Days of Future Past reality. That's it. Her. Yeah. She's cool. Yeah, Rachel's cool. But I never find a lot between the actual characters.
No.
Because Rachel goes off and joins Excalibur, and then it always seems like when she's on the X-Men, one of her parents is dead. So...
at any given moment.
That never seems to affect Cyclops or Jean too much.
Yeah.
She is technically their daughter. So now Cyclops has 2 kids. He's got his adult daughter.
Doesn't care about either of them.
The alternate future, and he's got his very adult son, Cable.
Boy, for someone who is so devoted to responsibility.
He's responsible to the X-Men.
To one thing and one thing only.
He's got time for his kids as long as they're X-Men. Yeah. As long as they're on the team. Jean and Cyclops finally get married. It's a big issue. Wolverine writes them a letter about how happy he is for them.
Thanks, Wolverine.
Thanks, Wolverine. Oh, you know what? I talked all about Cyclops and his relationship with his ex-wife. We have not talked about the second most important relationship in Cyclops' life, that of Wolverine.
Yes.
And technically Xavier. Before we get past the wedding, Cyclops and Xavier have this father-son relationship, which is a lot more damaging once you realize how many lies Xavier has shared to Cyclops.
It's like an episode of Smallville.
Yeah. But Cyclops for a long time is very much devoted to Xavier, and he's
he's the guy who stands by him no matter what.
Right.
For a while.
Wolverine and Cyclops do not get along from the beginning.
Nope.
Basically. Wolverine, he doesn't need training. He's not some dumb kid. Mm-hmm. And Cyclops' rules are rules.
Yeah.
And Wolverine's rules are for squares. So how do you do that?
He is a square.
That's basically how they interact forever.
Yep.
Most of the time. And it becomes important for a lot of things. Wolverine is super in love with Jean. Mm-hmm. So there's some of that. And a lot in some of my rereading of the 80s stuff, Jean is she's not unwelcoming of it.
Yeah.
There's some scenes at one point I think Jean says, "Darn it, I forgot what kissing Wolverine was like." Because they kissed, and she's like, "It's in my head now." So
just don't be kissing someone else.
Well, at that point, Cyclops is married, so she can kiss whoever she wants.
Yeah. Do what you want, Jean.
She's not married.
Live your life.
So Jean and Cyclops get married. They go on a honeymoon, and they're gonna go on a wonderful beach trip
to Krakoa.
Except they don't. They go into the future. They get pulled into the future. The Ascani daughter, who is Rachel, she's an elderly Rachel now. An elderly Rachel Summers.
What do you mean they have to raise her?
Elderly Rachel Summers brings Cyclops and Jean into the future. 2,000 years into the future.
Okay.
And now Jean and Scott are raising for about 12 years. So yeah, he does get to spend some time with them.
I guess that's nice.
Yeah. So
seems like Cable's got a super stable upbringing.
They have to raise baby Nate so he can become Cable, and then Cable can fight Apocalypse. And then once Cable defeats Apocalypse in the future, they go back in time.
Poor Cable.
But
you're not just a tool. You're a person.
Then they go into the past, and they meet Mr. Sinister for the first time.
No.
When he's Nathan Essex. They get to see his transformation. It turns out Sinister has made a pact with Apocalypse for immortality. And
I remember this.
Once he meets the Summers, he wants to use their offspring to create a powerful mutant who will defeat Apocalypse. So that's why he wanted to create Nathan. To create an X-Men, to create a mutant who could defeat Apocalypse. And then he does. So it's gross how he goes about it, but he got his results.
Way to go, Mr. Sinister.
That's where it starts. And actually, there's an episode of the animated series that doesn't have Cyclops, but it takes a lot from this miniseries.
Their genetic material, and it's so he takes it from the area of her uterus and stuff. It's all very...
Yeah, that's in the Savage Lands. That's season 2. But I'm saying there's in a later season, there's an origin episode that's just in Victorian England, and it's just about Mr. Sinister.
Okay.
Which is a cool episode. What else happens to Cyclops in the 90s? I guess, would you say a lot has happened to him? Yes. I mean, he's finding out about his son. He's getting married. He's going in the future. He's going in the past. Then there's the 12 storyline. Basically, there's this prophecy about the 12 that was lingering from the 80s. Basically, Apocalypse gathers 12 mutants and Nate Gray, who, again, Nate Gray is from the Age of Apocalypse. He is a clone Sinister created.
A clone of...
Of Cyclops and Jean. So here's the thing. Cable is the son of Cyclops and Madeline.
Pryor. But Madeline is a clone of Jean,
right.
So the genetic material is the same.
Is there, but they're not, they're not direct mother and son. But in Age of Apocalypse, Sinister creates Nate Gray from Cyclops and Jean's DNA. So he's...
Why does he have the same name?
Nate Gray?
Nate.
I don't know. So we knew who he was when we were reading the Age of Apocalypse. When the Age of Apocalypse ended, there were a few characters specific to that universe who escaped into the main universe. Nate Gray is one of them. So now...
I will say Nate Gray, good name.
Nate Gray? Better than Nate Summers?
Yes.
Okay. Nate Gray is now more powerful than Cable because he doesn't have the techno-organic virus. Apparently his book is absolutely garbage. He had an ongoing series for quite some time. Apocalypse captures 12 mutants. I don't have a whole list of all of them, and it's unimportant because the storyline's not that great. And Nate, and basically he's going to create a powerful body that he can live in now. Apocalypse.
He's great.
Apocalypse?
He's just a great guy.
Do you not like Apocalypse? Right, we've already talked about it in this episode. You don't like villains.
Dislike
the X-Men
him.
villains, yeah.
He's a bad person.
Yeah.
He's a villain.
And Cyclops stops him by merging with him, and they both die. Apocalypse and Cyclops.
How does he merge with him?
The energy merging. It's very swirly art style.
Okay.
And then he dies. But then guess what? He's alive.
Yay!
Very quick. Jean Grey and Cable go looking for him. They find him. They separate him from Apocalypse. Apocalypse dies. Scott's A-okay now.
Woohoo!
Except maybe he's not. Because now we're in the 2000s. This is where Grant Morrison is writing his run for about, 2.5 years or so. And they kind of he was merged with Apocalypse to kind of change Cyclops' character a bit so that he's now... maybe unsatisfied with just the plain X-Men life. Mm-hmm. He's a bit cockier. He's got more of an attitude now.
Okay.
And they're claiming on at the time him and Apocalypse were sharing a brain.
Yeah, so it affected him.
So this is when he begins his psychic affair with Emma Frost.
Yes.
It's only a psychic affair he uses to explain to Jean. There was no Emma Frost suggested it go physical. He said no. Keep it in the mind.
Oh, my word.
Him and Jean are having problems. Jean's very much all about the X-Men and mutant future, and Cyclops is I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Mm-hmm. Jean dies during this while fighting, becoming the Phoenix again. She dies during this run, and Cyclops is sad, but he kind of he moves on pretty quick.
Yeah.
A lot quicker than he did in the 80s. He moves on very fast. Him and Emma just start initiating the physicality. Right out of the gate.
Yep.
Wolverine.
Jean's dead.
Yeah, Jean's dead. So now him and Emma Frost are a couple and were for quite a long time until only a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. I don't mind the Emma Frost Cyclops dynamic. Actually, when Cyclops isn't a lunatic, the Emma Frost Cyclops dynamic is kind of fun. Because...
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like this is when I started reading the comics, like right here. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really understand what was happening with Emma and him.
Right.
I always sort of felt like she was always manipulating him in some way. Like it never felt like a legit, like, equal relationship.
I always kind of got he's like the one person she can't manipulate. Mm. And like she does her manipulating tactics and he just kind of like goes along with it because she looks like Emma Frost. But
I guess I don't know. It doesn't feel like a healthy.
No, I don't think it's healthy because she's not like a super healthy person.
And he's always still thinking about Jean, sort of, and like it's all weird.
Yeah, but less so with Emma than he was with Madeline. But of course, Emma doesn't look like Jean. I could see some people, disliking that that coupling. I thought it was fun. I thought it had some more character to it than like the fated lovers that Jean and Cyclops are.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
M-Day happens. M-Day is after House of M, after Scarlet Witch says no more mutants and everybody's lives are ruined. Around this time also is Deadly Genesis, where now Cyclops finds out he does have a brother, another third brother. You know who always knew? Sinister. In the 90s, Sinister is like, you and your brothers, and he's like, you mean brother? And Sinister's like, oh, yes, of course.
Yes.
Of course I meant brother. Singular. Goodbye. But no, he has a third brother, Vulcan. Vulcan came to Earth, met Xavier, met Cyclops, went off on a mission. Everybody thought he was dead. Xavier made Cyclops forget he had a brother named Vulcan.
Why? Why does he do it?
But then Vulcan actually didn't die and shows up and attacks a bunch of people, fights Cyclops. Cyclops now remembers. Vulcan goes into space to go mess up with this Shi'ar, and Cyclops is like, Xavier, you're out of here, Xavier. I'm in charge now. So this is where Xavier and Cyclops break up.
Yeah, finally Xavier has any repercussions for his insane decisions.
Now we're at Messiah Complex, and this is where I would say Cyclops is getting serious, and we start to see him, depending on who you're talking to, maybe a little unhinged. Messiah Complex is where the first mutant born after M-Day. So M-Day happens, no mutants lost their powers, there's only 198 mutants left, and no more mutants are being born. They're just gone. Then during a Messiah Complex, one is born, and it's a big deal, and so they go after them. Cable's there. Sinister's there during the Messiah Complex.
Yay.
He dies kind of in this, but then he becomes Miss Sinister, and then he's back and he's goopy. Now Cyclops is getting serious about protecting mutant kind, because there's only about 200 mutants left. Now they're slowly starting getting born, so he moves the whole team to San Francisco. The X-Men help San Francisco out, and San Francisco's like, move here. Like, the whole town loves them.
We are welcoming and happy.
Cyclops reforms X-Force, Wolverine's deadly task force of mutants made up of some pretty lethal X-Men. And he keeps his secret from everybody. And when Beast finds out, he is PO'd. So there's that thing. Now Cyclops is like putting together a kill squad. He deals with Norman Osborn's Dark Reign, which is when he formed the Dark Avengers.
I don't like any of that stuff.
And he has some of his teammates raise the sunken remains of Asteroid M from the Pacific Ocean, and they form the island nation Utopia. Pretty barren rock nation with like just a couple of houses and bases.
Utopia.
Yeah. This is basically, Cyclops is like, this is our nation. The world is basically seeing Cyclops as like the representative and leader of mutant kind.
Just all mutants.
All together.
Well, which is easier when there are fewer of them.
Like, Cyclops kind of has this reputation of being like super serious all the time, always buttoning his shirts and everything.
Yeah.
But this is where he becomes like so stoic and so he takes that to a whole nother level.
He's intense.
But he's becoming a bit zealotous with this. And he's basically like, Utopia is the mutant nation. Mm-hmm. We're separate from everybody else. This is where we can live.
Yeah.
And you have to leave us alone. Wolverine starts to disagree with that, and they have this schism. That was the name of the title.
A schism.
Yeah, there's a big fight. Kid Omega does an attack. In retaliation, a bunch of Sentinels are sent to Utopia. So Wolverine's like, we got to get out of here. Mm-hmm. There's a bunch of kids here. And Cyclops is like, this is our stand. And the whole argument is that Wolverine's like, it's just a rock. And Cyclops is like, no, it's not. It's an idea.
Our nation.
Wolverine goes off and forms the Jean Grey Institute, rubbing that into Cyclops' face.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, named it after your wife, buddy. And Cyclops and friends stay in Utopia. Actually, the issue is kind of funny because they're like older Sentinel models. So like the Sentinels are trying to fight Wolverine and Cyclops while Wolverine and Cyclops are too busy fighting each other. They don't even care. This is now when we get to the 2010s.
Which we're currently in.
Yeah, we've got another year of this being a relevant podcast. Avengers versus the X-Men event happens. I don't like this. But the Avengers and the X-Men are fighting because of Phoenix Force. The Phoenix Force is coming back to Earth, and everybody thinks it's going to show up to Hope Summers, who was raised by Cable in the future. So the baby that was born in Messiah Complex,
right,
the first mutant born,
yes,
was taken by Cable into the future. He named her Hope.
To keep her safe.
Yeah, to keep her safe. Bishop was after her, trying to kill her, because apparently she's supposed to cause Days of Future Past, even though that doesn't make sense anymore. So Bishop chases Cable and Hope into the future, and Cable basically raises her, like, as a teenager throughout. So, anyways, Hope is back in the regular universe. The Phoenix Force everybody thinks is going to show up to Hope.
Yeah.
And the Avengers are like, no, this is bad. We can't do the Phoenix. We have to kill or something. We're stupid. We're the Avengers. There's a big fight between the X-Men and the Avengers over it. Mm-hmm. And Cyclops is just, like, over it. Like, Captain America's like, hey, man, I'm going to die. And Cyclops is like, no, get out of here. You're not helpful. Yeah. You've never been helpful to us mutants. And it's true. The Avengers suck. And
Hot take for Bear.
What happens is the Phoenix is split up into 5 pieces.
Oh, this is nuts.
Namor, Emma Frost.
They bring Namor.
Well, Namor has been hanging with Utopia for a while because he's technically a mutant.
Namor's a mutant?
Namor's a mutant. Oh. And so he was with the X-Men for a long time during this whole Utopia thing. Namor, Illyana, or Magic, Colossus, Emma, and Cyclops each get a piece of the Phoenix Force, and they start using the powers. But then the X-Men start thinking, like, maybe this isn't a good idea. And so they all fight. Cyclops attacks, during the fight against the X-Men and the Avengers, Cyclops attacks Emma so that he can get her Phoenix power. He becomes Dark Phoenix, and he kills Professor Xavier. Xavier will be fine later.
Don't worry, he's okay.
Cyclops gets beaten. He is arrested, he escapes, and he forms a new team in the mountains. I think it's a Weapon X base.
Mountains.
And sometimes he's gross about young Jean Grey from the past as well during this time. At this time, the original 5 X-Men from the 60s are transported to the Beast, brings them to the present because of I don't know. It's so stupid. I hate this stuff.
Beast?
You like this stuff? You like the young
the
X-Men in the present? I
enjoy them now that they're here.
Uh-huh.
I think it's insane that Beast would ever
It's crazy that he did it, yeah.
Messing with the timeline for any reason, especially for something stupid like we just want to remind Cyclops about his values or whatever.
Beast is trying to remind Cyclops, and he's also trying to figure out like what the X-Men are starting for. Like, Beast is the only one having this. He's having like a midlife crisis. But then those 5 X-Men go hang out with Cyclops' mountain team. And sometimes, Cyclops is a bit weird about teenage Jean.
Yeah.
At one point, Kitty Pryde's like, "You ever go into that room again? I'm gonna hit you."
Kitty, I really like Kitty in those.
Yeah.
In that like storyline.
Yeah.
I think she feels really legit as like a mentor type
Yeah.
person. I think you see most of her stuff is like her as like this ditzy little kid, and now you start to see her as like an adult, and she seems like she's got this responsibility forced on her, and so she like really goes with it. And then she's got the whole thing with Peter Quill and.
Oh yeah, you like
I dig it.
Guardian stuff.
Yeah.
So Cyclops is basically forming like his X-Men team now is a lot more violent than Wolverine's X-Men team, which is pretty funny, and he's very much into like starting a revolution and like being a lot more.
He's just like Magneto.
Aggressive about the mutant agenda. Yeah, he's slowly becoming. Now in some of the comics, kids wear Cyclops is right t-shirts because he's kind of made himself into this figure. It's a rough time for Cyclops because Chris Claremont was like he was damaged good with the ex-wife. I'm like this is just where it's like, what do you do after this? Now that he's become this mutant revolutionary villain character who has killed and I don't know how you come back from that stuff. The Inhumans, whom I hate now, have a thing called the Terrigen Mist, which if you're in it and you have Inhuman DNA, you will become an Inhuman. And so they just send this huge mist, like 2 giant mist clouds, out to the world, and it just covers over cities. And so, like, 20,000 people in the city, you get 20 Inhumans out of it, maybe. And it's not supposed to be harmful.
More than 20,000 people.
It's not supposed to be harmful, though. And it turns out it is to mutants. It's,
really?
To some mutants, it has deadly repercussions. And so during the death of X, the X-Men go check out Muir Island, which has been infected with this and some have died. And Cyclops starts coughing.
Uh-oh.
And so they have this big fight with some of the Inhumans trying to get the mist out there. Cyclops is rallying everybody through psychic communication via Emma to tell everybody about the Terrigen mist being deadly. So they go to the mist and everything, and they change it so it's not there anymore, and the humans are mad, and it looks like Black Bolt kills Cyclops. But it turns out that was all a psychic illusion caused by Emma. Cyclops died right there when he caught the Mpox from the Terrigen mist, and she basically, like, built up this huge story that, you know, he died in a bigger, more heroic way. She makes him a figure, so he's dead. But he's back! Thanks to Cable and a thing called the Phoenix Cage. Okay. So Cyclops has been hanging out a little bit.
Okay.
And he's back. And now we're at the present.
Here we are.
That's been Cyclops' 2010s.
Holy
so
crap.
He had his second death. That's the story of Cyclops in the comic books.
A lot going on.
Cartoons. We've watched Pride of the X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
He's, I guess, how you expect when you think.
Yeah.
90s one. I think he's pretty cool.
He's better than I remember.
Is he? Yeah.
As I'm watching it again, I'm finding him more compelling.
He's funny at times.
I don't know that
his deliveries can be funny. Like we just talked about that whole "let's do it again sometime" Sugar line from Rogue, where it's like, like he has funny delivery.
Okay.
The show is good because they do the leader stuff, but you know that, like, he's annoyed with Wolverine because he won't follow orders.
Yeah.
But I don't know. He seems like he's more of a personable.
Person.
Yeah.
In the cartoon.
Yeah. I like Cyclops in there. And again, the intro opening number with Cyclops where he's just on that, like, plateau and he can't control his mutant powers. Yeah. That to me has always been, like, so iconic for me. That one shot, how it opens with that.
Yeah.
It's always had a very profound effect on me when I, like, see that and think of Cyclops. He's in X-Men Evolution. He's one of the teenagers.
I like him in Evolution.
Yeah. He's still kind of the tactical leader there.
The voice actor is from
Inuyasha?
Gundam Wing is where I know him from, so I was predisposed to like him.
Okay. He's still, like, the leader, like the team leader, but he's still a teenager.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's sort of, he's not like the pushy kind of leader, where he's just sort of like...
Yeah. And Wolverine's like an all full grown adult to his, like, 16-year-old Cyclops, so there's less of that. Wolverine and the X-Men, Cyclops is sad because Jean has died, and Wolverine has to, like, make him be on the team.
Yeah.
So I remember, like, being okay with that Cyclops. He's got, like, that long leather jacket. He's wearing his, like, hood costume, but he's got the jacket.
Oh, yeah.
Which I thought was cool.
That's a good design.
So I've only watched that whole series once through, so I gotta do that again. Oh, and then I guess the anime. He's fine in the anime, too.
I think I've seen that. I don't really remember.
Okay. Him and Emma are in there.
Yeah.
And Emma's in the Wolverine and X-Men as well. All right, that's cartoons. Movies, I don't even know if it's worth talking about Cyclops as, like, being in the movies, because the only time James Marsden gets to act as Cyclops is in the first movie.
Yeah.
It's the
but
only...
he's good. I think he's pretty good in the first movie.
He's good in the first movie. He's got some good lines. He's got some personality.
Yeah.
He looks good in the visor and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, after that, Cyclops is a non-entity.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, we just talked about The Last Stand. And then we will definitely talk more about this when we talk Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix. He's there, and he doesn't get pooped on in the way that, like, X2 and Last Stand do to Cyclops.
Yeah.
But he's never really Cyclops as we know him. Because
he's like a pre-Cyclops.
He's never, like, the leader.
Yeah.
Because in Apocalypse, it's Beast and Mystique. And then in Dark Phoenix, it's Beast and Mystique again.
Yeah.
Who are, like, their field leaders. And then, like, Xavier's in the... So it's... Cyclops never gets to be, like, the cool leader in any of the movies. Oh, and I guess he's also in Wolverine Origins, but also borderline non-entity. Video games. Any fun Cyclops video game memories?
No, I don't think that I ever chose him for...
In X-Men,
Legends.
Legends?
No.
He has some cool... Well, in the first game, you have a solo mission where you're just Cyclops, and you have to fight Havoc.
The only thing I remember about it is that my husband Nick liked to put different outfits on him.
Yeah, he has some cool outfits. The thing with X-Men Next Dimension is you would get that cool announcer voice telling you what team you formed based off of which characters you picked. X-Men Next Dimension, and in fighting games in general, Cyclops can be so annoying because he's range. And so he'll just, that's his power. And you can't not have him have that power. So he'll just be on one end of the screen using his optic blast while the other character's like, please, stop. I used to use him quite a bit in X-Men Next Dimension on the PS2, which was a fighting game. Him and Havoc were both fun. But it was fun getting good with Cyclops in that just punching, so you could go up close and punch them. Yeah. And then just blast them to the other end. And he had this move that was like, because the levels were 3D, so you could like move around them in all directions. But he had a move that would just like wipe all in front of him. It was annoying. And the smaller the levels got, forget it. And, I mean, he's been in pretty much all the games. You don't have a X-Men video game without Cyclops. Yeah. So even on like the Sega ones, he's got some cool appearances. Nick from Facebook has this to say about Cyclops.
Yes.
So look, he's always been my favorite. He's so solid and together in the 90s show. He was a strong leader. I don't think he's gotten much of a fair shake since. I really like his recent solo series and would have liked to have seen it continue. I think he's talking about the Young Cyclops solo series.
With like Corsair?
Yeah, young Cyclops from the 60s in the present hangs out with his space dad for a little bit. So yeah.
I mean, that sounds fun. I mean, it's true. He is good in the 90s show. He's a solid leader in that show and in certain instances. I just don't like him.
I think in the 80s when they're rehabilitating him, I think in the 80s for the most part, except for this whole he leaves his wife and child storyline that was written by people who weren't writing the X-Men. Like, there's a lot of good stuff to like about Cyclops just as a character. Because, like, the stuff we read that happens to him are, like, the big events. But, you know, when he's just on the X-Men, doing his X-Men thing, he's good at his job.
He is good at his job.
And
I feel like the thing that like he doesn't get a fair shake. I think that's true, but I think that's just sort of by virtue of what his character is. Because he's a square. He's the leader, he does a good job, and so that's it. Like there's not, when you do a good job and you're just fine, I appreciate the job you're doing, sir.
No, because, like, he's good at his job in the 60s when, you know, it's the original X-Men and stuff, but they give him more personality in the 70s and 80s. And in the 90s, I think he's fine. The Wolverine love triangle thing is over. He's time traveling and, you know, he's getting married. He's pretty collected. I mean, he dies through to Apocalypse. I really don't think it's until the whole there's no more mutants, I have to do everything in my power to keep everybody alive all the time, everything is my fault.
Yeah, then he gets nuts.
That drives him just crazy. Grant Morrison's run has him, like, very kind of, it's also when he's having the psychic affair with Emma, but, like, in the field, he's very, like, calm and collected. Like, there's a scene where some Sentinels are blowing up his ship, and he's just, like, in his chair, just telling the ship to initiate procedures, and he's just, like, unfazed by everything around him. He's just seen it all. He
takes his role seriously, and he's been well trained, and, you know.
So, in terms of our thoughts, you don't like Cyclops at all?
That's hard for me to say, because as we've been going through this podcast, and I've seen specific things, I've appreciated him more.
Right.
I guess there's just not a lot about him that I latch onto. Like, I don't relate to him in any way. And so, like, I can find things like, oh, that was funny, or oh, I like how he interacted with that person, or whatever, but there's nothing about the character that grabs me.
Okay.
Yeah.
For a while, I kind of hopped on the bandwagon where it was, like, cool not to like Cyclops because he was the Boy Scout and Wolverine was the cooler guy. And it's kind of like, if you like Wolverine, there is a part of you that has to not like Cyclops because Cyclops is constantly stopping Wolverine from being the best Wolverine he can be. And then I just slowly grew to, like, appreciate the Cyclops characteristics that, like, his pros and cons and, like, his his importance with it. And even just like Storm can control the weather and do all this stuff. Magneto has control of magnetism, gets all these cool like effects, very showy stuff. But like I kind of learned that like, oh, Cyclops' power is pretty cool on its own.
Yeah.
And, you know, thrown in with the whole he can't control it, I think it adds something to a very like simple power on paper, where he's always having to wear the sunglasses. I've always thought the sunglasses are cool. I've never gone as Cyclops for Halloween, and I should, because we're both slim, lanky, and have brown hair. But I tend to hate the hood costume.
Yeah, I don't like the hood.
It's fine, I guess, for me in like the 70s and 80s, because everybody's kind of got those costumes.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it looks gross when he's wearing it. It looks, I really...
It looks like full body Lycra.
Yeah. You know, in the 90s when Jim Lee redesigned him so that he's, you know, visor and hair and stuff, that makes more sense to me.
You want hair.
The animated series, yeah. Because we talked about how the movie writers think Cyclops is unrelatable because you can't see his eyes.
Those guys are dumb.
But I feel like, given the sunglasses, if you put the hood on, I feel like you can't relate to him. Then he looks like an alien.
That's true. Then he doesn't seem like a person.
Once you're like, oh no, he's got whooshy hair. He's a human.
Oh, of course.
No Uggo would have great hair like that. So he still gets to be the handsome Cyclops.
I do feel like as I get older, I appreciate him more. Like, I see the characteristics that he has.
Yeah.
That, like, as a young person, I would be like...
Because he's the teacher's pet.
I would think he's like a dweeb or something.
Yeah, he's a dweeb or the teacher's pet.
But, like, now, I'm like, he's self-possessed.
He's responsible.
He's responsible.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
He's just trying to do his job, everybody.
That I appreciate as an older person.
Yeah, as you get older and you have more responsibilities. Like, it's not easy. It's not easy telling people what to do, having to be the boss. People don't like you. Wolverine's always stealing your girlfriend or something. That's annoying.
Always.
It's just...
if I had a nickel...
For every time,
Wolverine stole my girlfriend.
It would just... You could lace your whole skeleton with the nickels. And then you would have...
and then maybe I could challenge...
Wolverine to a duel. I think he would still cut through nickel.
You think the nickel...
Yeah, I think adamantium can cut through nickel.
Man, back to the drawing board.
He's always has to be... in an X-Men thing. Yeah. Period.
Yeah, it is impressive that he was so locked in. Like he like X-Men 1, Cyclops, and then he's just
and like
he's a fixer.
You can do X-Men stuff that doesn't have Iceman or Angel, but you can't do one that doesn't have Cyclops.
Yeah.
But yeah, the past, gosh, I want to say like 15 years. I feel like I've been a rough patch for Cyclops.
Yeah,
in the
when
comics.
You just like list out everything that's happened.
I mean, he's had a rough life.
Yeah,
it kind of makes sense that he would eventually become this villainous thing.
I think it's a really interesting place for them to take him.
Yeah, more often than not, I actually prefer seeing Havoc show up in a story.
Havoc, I don't like.
You don't like Havoc?
Yeah, I just think.
Why? Because he slept with his brother's wife during the Inferno storyline? I did not know
that happened. There's something about Havoc that always feels pandering to me, sort of like in Cyclops has a brother and he zaps from his hands.
In X-Men Next Dimension, he if he won a fight, he would always say stuff like, "Let's see Cyclops do that." Just like, okay, calm down. That's it on Cyclops. We had to cover Cyclops because we couldn't talk about like Cable in the future without having done that.
Well, I mean, you can't talk about anything. As I just kind of like read a brief Cyclops' history, and I was like, so this is just the history of the X-Men.
Honestly,
from the perspective of Cyclops.
With this and that series we did on the 1999 Gambit comic series, we've basically done a Mr. Sinister spotlight too.
Yeah, so now we don't have to.
No, we haven't. We have to talk about Sinister sometime. I'm Dust vs. Tweak everywhere online, and apart from other shows on the Radio Meanwhile Network, I'm the co-host on the podcast, The All the Books Show. Thank you to Prophetic Music for our theme song. Join us next episode as we watch and discuss X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Which I like.
And we'll also probably talk about the game a little bit. Again, you can find more about this show and others like it at our network's website, radiomeanwhile.com. Please follow us at Facebook and Twitter, or previously on X. Please rate, subscribe, and share the show on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening. Oh no! My optic glass! Hilary, look out! Oh no! I was Cyclops.